What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to this week's live stream for the Bitcoin Stock Show. I am your host, Colin Harper, editor-in-chief of Blockspace Media. Today, we've got a banger show for you with Sue Ennis, Big Suey of Hut 8. She's going to be filling in all the details for us on Hut 8's new GPU as a service and also some of the HPC developments that we've seen with their HPC business line. We'll sprinkle in a few updates there with their general mining operations as well. But without further ado, would love to add Sue Ennis to the stage so we can get going and chop it up. Sue, how are you doing today?
Good to see you. Hi, guys. Great to see you. Super pumped to be here. So much going on and lots to get into.
A lot going on as ever. It seems like the Bitcoin mining industry is effervescent with news and exciting new developments. Not the least of which, obviously, are the HPC plays that have been getting a lot of attention and traction in the mainstream media and crypto media. We'll get into that in a second, especially with regards to the fact that Hut 8 was kind of the first mover here with regards to an HPC strategy. But before we get going, would love just a quick intro about yourself and about Hut 8 as well for viewers who are unaware.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Sue. I lead investor relations and some government relations here at Hut 8. I've been with the company since December 2020, but I've been in the crypto space since late 2016. There's been a lot of change at the company. And I think really what's happening now in the Bitcoin miner to AI data center conversion story and thesis is super, super interesting. So I'm excited to get into it today with you guys.
Awesome. Would love to have maybe a closing question on some changes from Hut 8 throughout the year since you've been there. I didn't know that you've been there since 2020. You might as well be a tenured veteran there at this point. That's a decade or two in the crypto space.
It's wild, yeah.
So to kick it off, Hut 8 has been in the HPC business since January 2022. Y'all acquired 5 data centers, I believe, from Terago, and they're operating in Canada. Can you walk us through a little bit of what the rationale was for that purchase at the time? How much of that was skating towards the puck for HPC and AI? Because no miners were really talking about it at that point, if I recall correctly. It was still very much kind of a subterranean topic, not being picked up much. How much of that was kind of skating towards the puck as Hut 8 saw it, and how much of that was influence on former executive staff, like with Jamie Leverton, because I know that she had a lot of experience. She came from the HPC world. So what was the rationale behind that acquisition?
Yeah, totally. So Jamie, the former CEO of Hut 8, she was the one who executed on that transaction. And Jamie, so we had a CEO transition on February 7th of 2024. Asher took the helm. Jamie was transitioned out. And she had a thesis that one day there was going to be a world where all of the compute lived under the same roof. So traditional cloud and co-location, Bitcoin mining, maybe even, I think at that time, Ethereum still hadn't moved to proof of stake just yet. And so that was sort of the thesis, that eventually all these data centers were going to be one massive composable compute platform. And so was it where the puck was going? I'm not sure, because that's where the puck has landed now. Because really what we're seeing now, and why there's so much buzz about Bitcoin miners as potential AI data center training opportunities, is because of this complete lack of power and unprecedented demand for power to power AI data centers, electric vehicles, the repatriation of manufacturing lines, onshoring of manufacturing activities. And so it's kind of a different driver and sort of thesis behind why Bitcoin miners are now looking and trading, or sorry, why Bitcoin miners are now potentially looking like emerging data center REITs, trading at an insane discount. So it was a little bit of a different thesis, but one of the major benefits of some of the moves that Jamie did was the fact that now that we're in conversations with hyperscalers like the Oracles, the Microsofts of the world, talking about, what would a potential conversion opportunity look like? Or again, we've got this massive pipeline of power that we're in the middle of closing. It really is an incredible benefit, and we think advantage, as we continue to sort of look at these alt data center infrastructure, as we look at standing up this alternative data center infrastructure, to have over 40 people on our team who don't know shit about Bitcoin, but are very well abreast in all things to do with high performance computing, i.e. they've like understanding SOC 2 certification, understanding ISO certification, understanding a lot of the nuances that come with standing up this alt compute. That's a lot different than taking a black box and shoving it into like a chicken coop. You know what I mean? So yeah, the thesis was different. And it's certainly not like Asher's thesis really is that at the end of the day, Hut 8 is a power and development company, and Bitcoin mining is our tool to keep accumulating cheap megawatts and then flipping to the next highest use case on the Electron. But Jamie's move are creating tremendous advantages as we have our conversations with hyperscalers and as we pursue this new level of infrastructure. So that's how I would frame it.
And those advantages being an early mover as a Bitcoin miner in the HPC space and cultivating that talent in-house before everyone else did. Is that kind of the advantage you're talking about there?
Yeah. So the deal actually came with over 40 employees in the data centers and over 200 existing enterprise customers. So we've had for over 2 years customers in the like financial services space, special effects, media and entertainment, government, healthcare. So again, we've got like a deeper understanding as to some of the nuances to managing customer sensitivity, privacy laws, et cetera. We understand that piece of it, I think, a lot more than any of our peers who are now suddenly pivoting from being a Bitcoin miner to standing up AI training data centers. So,
right. So on that note, with regards to the learning curve here, it seems like having that staff as part of the acquisition was probably really great for greasing the wheels, right? Yeah. For Hut 8 to get into this industry. What have been some of the challenges or lessons learned? I know that's kind of a broad question, but it seems like a crazy leap for, like what you said, miners are used to taking little black box and throwing it in the desert or throwing it anywhere in the world, where as long as you have a power hookup, you can just plug it in. The maintenance is pretty low. You don't really need much redundancy at all, really, for anything. So what have been the learning curves with taking on this HPC business? I mean, it's been over 2 years now that Hut 8 has operated these data centers.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the things about Jamie, our former CEO, is she definitely had a little bit of a kink for complexity that I would say Asher also has. And so I think we got the data centers for under 30 million bucks, and they had no debt, but they definitely had some hair on them. So a lot of the past 2 years have been and continue to be really making sure that we're optimizing for margins and revenues and keeping the data centers in a state where we can continue to attract new clients, which isn't always easy when you have sort of older and antiquated infrastructure. And then as a business, you need to think, okay, do we want to double down on cloud and co-location, which is growing at a CAGR of about 9+% over the next 5 to 10 years? Or do we want to continue to invest sort of really in the future of our business, continue to double down on Bitcoin mining as a tool to keep generating more power, to keep accumulating cheap megawatts? And so where I'm going with that is the business that when we bought it, we knew we had a little bit of hair on it. So it was certainly for the past 2 years we've been focused on like, how do we clean it up? How do we make sure that we have the right products in there that customers want? But really, I think the competitive edge is the fact that we've now got that expertise, and we've gone through, for example, in the past 2 years, we did go through a SOC 2 certification with those data centers, which is applicable in the tier 3 AI space. And those certification processes can take up to 12 months and are extremely complicated. So I would say that those are some of the learnings we've had, just sort of how difficult it can be to sometimes stand up and clean up and run this types of compute. But ultimately, it's a tool that we think is definitely going to give us an advantage in the future as we continue to pursue alt forms of compute and infrastructure.
With regards to those advantages, you mentioned earlier being in talks with hyperscalers, having conversations with them, I'm sure, obviously, to a level of complexity, and there's probably a bunch of stuff that you can't say about it for a number of reasons with NDAs and things like that. But just curious to get your thoughts on, with regards to taking those power assets that Bitcoin miners have and converting it to alternative forms of compute, like you said, what do you think is more likely? That a hyperscaler comes in and purchases power blocks from a miner and then converts that to a tier 3 or up data center, or that the Bitcoin miners go to the hyperscalers and put a Bitcoin mine in the back? This is the mullet miner thesis, famously popularized by Tom Massaro of Kungsleden, now Cathedra. Which seems to be more likely to you?
That's a really good question. In terms of actual deal structure, I think we are going to see more core weave type deals come down the pipeline, where we're seeing a hyperscaler come in, use the PPA, infrastructure gets custom retrofitted for their needs. But is there also a world where we see miners co-located with hyperscalers in order to smooth out some of the volatility that will come with these AI training algorithms, which can obviously cause tremendous spikes of demand? If there's an engineer in Silicon Valley who's running a massive compute for 48 hours and then switching it back off, that can obviously create a tremendous amount of strain on the grid, like that volatility. So is there a world where miners could be co-located to help smooth out some of the volatility that could come with these AI training data centers? Certainly. So I'm not sure if I would say there's one over the other that is more likely, but I could definitely see a world where there's both.
Yeah, that makes sense a lot to me. I feel like I keep coming back to this, and my listeners might get tired of saying this, but the most exciting thing for me right now covering Bitcoin miners transitioning to AI is that it's a totally new playing field. Obviously, Bitcoin mining, a new playing field, AI compute, a new playing field coming together, but there's no surefire way of standing up one of these operations yet, right? Seems like the most obvious ones out the gate are what basically every miner has done, including HUD 8, which is either lease a data center or go out and just buy one that's already up, right? But that to me seems to be the lowest barrier to entry here, and leads into my next question about HUD 8's new GPU as a service. Y'all announced this very recently, I believe, within the last week or so. And I would love to get your thoughts on exactly what the rationale is here with the lease model, right? Because as I understand from this press release, HUD 8 purchased 1,000 H100s. They've been deployed at a tier 3 data center in Chicago, and now HUD 8 has locked in a client with this on a 5-year deal. So what's the rationale between or for this approach? Is this kind of another easy win to break into the AI market and continue to build expertise here?
No, I think really what it comes down to is how we're looking at opportunity in the space. So we see our business as having 3 layers. There's the first layer, which is power, which you can look at as like the operating system of the business. So this is just a scaled portfolio of power assets that we're going to continue to grow using Bitcoin mining to capture cheap megawatts. And then, like I said, find that next highest use case on the electron. On some sites, for example, it is now AI training data centers. In the future, it could be green hydrogen. It could be desalination. Who knows? But that's the thesis on this first layer of our business, our power layer, like the operating system. Then we have the infrastructure layer, and that's where we actually stand up compute on top, or stand up infrastructure on top of that power layer. And you can look at that as sort of like the app store. And then we've got the third layer of our business, which is compute. And that's where you can look at it like the apps. And that is where we stand up compute in order to monetize and maximize the infrastructure that's sitting on that base operating layer, on that power layer. So this GPU as a service business comes in on the third layer. So the app store, the compute layer of our business, because again, we really see ourselves as building a vertically integrated power to compute infrastructure in the middle business, and then monetizing opportunities across each piece of that infrastructure.
So how does this GPU as a service differ from the Terago acquisitions? As I understand, the Terago acquisitions were cloud computing for
That's right.
hospitals and medical companies, correct? Mostly, or am I?
Yeah, no. So the cloud, so the Terago business is traditional cloud and co-location. So it's we've got two of the 5 data centers are tier 3. Like we can house tier 3 compute, but otherwise the other 3 data centers are lower than tier 3 compute. And that's, again, we've got customers in like the healthcare space backing up their customer records and data in our data centers. We've got a couple of media entertainment companies that do some special effects in our data centers. So it's much different than this GPU as a service. But actually, you know what, even as I say this, it's not that much different, because it's still the same concept of customers coming in, renting your compute, using your servers, obviously for their own compute needs. And that's what we've done with this GPU as a service model. So we spent about $40 million on actually buying NVIDIA H100s and then co-locating them at a data center outside of Chicago. So the additional benefit too of us doing that is we know that we want to continue to pursue standing up alt infrastructure, and having this GPU as a service business enabled us, and co-locating it enabled us to really get a sense as to, okay, what does it look like to run this compute? What do the cooling requirements look like? What are the things that could go wrong? Like, how do we make sure that we understand this compute ahead of us starting to really double down on building up infrastructure in this space?
So that lends very well into my next question. Before you double down on infrastructure in the HPC space, are there plans for Hut 8 in the future to greenfield a site, to retrofit a site, to partner with, so that we can expect to maybe see that over the next year or two? I won't hold you to anything.
Yeah, so we haven't formally disclosed much detail on this gigawatt. So right now, Hut 8, we've got a gigawatt of power under management. And then we've got an additional gigawatt of power of low-hanging fruit that we're in the process of closing. And then our power pipeline is much larger beyond that. But this one particular gigawatt that we're working on is a handful of deals, and we felt very confident disclosing that to the market. So we haven't spoken in too much detail about what that 1 gigawatt under exclusivity that we're in the middle of closing looks like. But you can certainly, high level, art of the possible. Greenfield is certainly within the realm of possibility. Retrofit's also within the realm of possibility. And I hope to have more disclosures for you guys soon, because
yeah, this is some juicy tidbits here. The gigawatt that is in the pipeline currently, has Hut 8 teased this in any of the quarterly reports or in any press release?
Yeah, we've been teasing it, but like, again, I think we need to show a little more leg, if you ask me. And so I'm definitely pushing for that. And so hopefully we'll have some more updates for you guys soon. But yeah, we've definitely been teasing it because, again, we're extremely excited about it. We've got a huge team that's working really hard on closing this. And yeah, we'll keep you guys posted.
Yeah, really interested to see where that goes. Last kind of question on that, and just tell me, screw off, Colin. I can't answer that because we're trying to close the deal and I don't want to get anyone in trouble. But will this be flexible load? Will this be dedicated for mining? Will this be dedicated for HPC? Is kind of up in the air?
So again, we haven't disclosed exact percentage Bitcoin versus AI, but you can certainly assume that a substantial portion we would be putting towards AI.
Okay.
Or would be AI eligible and in the ballpark of AI eligibility. So
okay, cool. With regards to that, you mentioned a good amount of it will be AI and HPC compatible. Some more of it obviously will be for Bitcoin mining. How does Hut 8 view balancing the two of those business lines over the next, let's say having Epoch or over the next decade? Because I feel like there's almost this consideration where there are some miners who are really trying to completely rebrand as an HPC player. I mean, Core Scientific kind of comes to mind with that, right? And there's a lot of advertising and a lot of marketing speak that gets thrown around where it's like, we're a data center company now, right? And I think that makes sense. It's all fine and good, but I wonder if there's a consideration for, are you losing out if you bet on two horses, or would it be better to just bet on one? So I'm curious to see how HUD 8 views that.
So I think this is where it goes back to what I was saying earlier about like how we look at this business. At the end of the day, HUD 8, we look at ourselves as a power and development company, full stop. So one day in the future, Asher certainly said on calls that, you could see HUD 8 potentially managing in the low teens of gigawatts of power under management and continuing to capture cheap electrons, using stranded electrons for a very low cost, using Bitcoin mining as the initial commercialization strategy, and then flipping to the next best use case or next best return on electron as technology continues to evolve. And so that doesn't mean that we're now suddenly becoming AI data center operators, or that we're going to, pivot once AI is no more, if AI goes out of vogue, and go back to Bitcoin mining. The whole thesis again is power. We are power first development company. And then again, finding that next best use case. So I wouldn't really look at it as us pivoting in our strategy, because this is actually exactly sort of our thesis playing out, which is our bet that as technology continues to evolve, there will be more use cases for electrons and stranded energy that no one has wanted, that Bitcoin miners have been sitting on for years. So that's kind of our thesis. And like I said, green hydrogen is picking up in Japan and Singapore. Our CFO is wake me up when something actually happens in green hydrogen. He doesn't think it's super bullish, but I've been reading a bunch of Morgan Stanley reports on it. And so maybe it is, green hydrogen is the next best use case for some of our electrons. For those of you who don't know, green hydrogen is the process of making hydrogen out of renewable power. And so renewable energy that obviously we are mining at some of our sites. And also the other thing is that not all sites are AI eligible. So you need water, you need fiber, location is obviously certainly a consideration. Are you sitting on a floodplain? Can you even insure the site for AI? So I don't think you'd ever see a world where HUD 8 would pick one over the other, because again, that's not part of the thesis. And also at the end of the day, not all sites are AI eligible. So
yeah, so just basic thesis being maximum return on the electrons, right?
Exactly. Maximum return on ROE. That's us.
So going back to just piggyback on what you said there at the end, that not all sites are AI eligible. What is the ideal AI site? Because I've heard a lot of different takes from a lot of different people on this.
Yeah.
I've been in spaces and interviews where I've had guys say, if your site is out in the middle of nowhere in Texas, good luck. I've had other guys say that it's not even possible to do these retrofits if you have a Bitcoin mine data center. I don't think that's totally true. We'd be very, very surprised if Core Scientific was pissing away a $2 billion deal on something that's not possible, right? So all that to say, what is the ideal site for something like an AI data center, especially with regards to a Bitcoin miner maybe that's looking to retrofit?
Yeah, so certainly a site that has ample water access, fiber access. If you're closer to a larger population, that would be pretty palatable for a hyperscaler. Grid interconnection requests already approved, land studies done, insurability, making sure that you're not sitting on a floodplain. Those are all sort of the ideal initial criteria. I think that would be super appealing to a data center. But one of the things that we think is that, so AI training and AI data centers, there's a big focus on redundancy. So redundancy, 100% uptime is super important in an AI training data center. But we think a few years from now that there may be a world where hyperscalers decide that maybe redundancy isn't as important if it's not a customer facing compute. So for example, if it is just one customer who's training or the training that they're doing for their own internal purposes, maybe 100% uptime isn't as important as it would be for other types of infrastructure and other that is more customer facing. And so this is where we think there is a bit of an overlap in the AI and in the Bitcoin mining space and in some of those more remote areas, because as long like the overlap between Bitcoin and AI training, AI data centers is it needs cooling, it needs power, and it needs fiber. And then it's up to the hyperscalers what level of redundancy. So we do think there is a world where hyperscalers may not be so focused on 100% uptime ergo some of these other sites that maybe don't have that uptime, but you can make up for it with backup generators, uninterruptible power sources, may actually become even more in demand potentially in the next couple of years. At the end of the day, though, really we think that the future of all of this, whether it be AI, Bitcoin, whatever it is cooling. Cooling at the end of the day is the key driver for all of this compute, because chips are only getting more efficient and increased in density, and cooling is king in terms of making sure they all work properly.
So this is a good point to make with regards to the U3 S21 EXPH. I'm just going to call it the U3. I've said it before, Bitmain marketing department, hit me up if you want help with names for things in the future, because that is a mouthful. All that being said, though, I don't want to talk about it too much because we've got a pod coming out actually with Asher on the mining pod next week. But I do want to talk about this form factor, because to me, it's like the perfect synergy of the HPC landscape and Bitcoin mining, right? And I've always thought that if we're running shoebox miners 10 years from now, then there's a failure of imagination or execution on the part of the Bitcoin mining industry. So what was kind of the genesis of this design? I know Hut 8, for those who are listeners who don't know, Hut 8 partnered with Bitmain to help design this new hydro-cooled model, which is a server rack form factor. And it uses, was it direct liquid cooling, DLC?
Yes, direct liquid to chip. That's right.
Yeah. So what is this, going back to skating to where the puck's going, this just to me cannot be seen this cannot be viewed without having it viewed right next to the HPC and AI kind of revolution.
For sure. Yeah. So I think this speaks to one of the core philosophies of the Hut 8 team. And I'll say particularly the US Bitcoin team. So Hut 8 and US Bitcoin Corp remerged December 1st, 2023 last year. Asher was the co-founder of US Bitcoin Corp. I will say philosophically, that team is built upon the premise of never be satisfied with the status quo. And so when we were looking at potentially upgrading our fleet and sort of like where the future of mining is going, as we continue to close this pipeline, as we continue to sort of look at what's happening in the AI and hyperscaler conversation space, updating the form factor was a big thing that Asher and the engineering team thought desperately needed to be done. And actually in 2021, Asher pitched Eric Schmidt. And Eric Schmidt said to Asher back then, he was like, hold on, why are you plugging these into chicken coops and like chicken wire? Like, where is the institutionalization of rack design and blades? And Asher was like, you know what, you're right. And then we had this idea of going to the manufacturer and saying, look, like, we're not just focused on improving efficiency, but we really are trying to focus on like, where's the next like iteration, where's the next era of the actual form factor going, and designing with traditional data form factor infrastructure in mind, not only synergizes supply chains, but also provides, again, a future where potentially there is a world where, let's say, an AI data center is using this form factor, this direct DLC cooling, and we're building it for something like 400,000 per megawatt versus a traditional AI data center being stood up as like 10 million per megawatt. I'll let Asher talk more about it, but the genesis was a strong dissatisfaction in the status quo and just adhering to the status quo. Like we are very, very focused on innovation and doing things differently. And this is one example of that.
So for designing this, did Hut 8 approach Bitmain and ask them, it's like, give us a better form factor?
Yes, we've had a really good relationship with Bitmain forever. And so it was sort of like an ongoing conversation. Again, Asher and the whole team, like, really take an innovation mindset for everything that they do. Even if you look at some of the deals we've done, from like a project level financing, from a retiring debt and converting, converting debt holders into shareholders of common equity, like we just did with the Anchorage deal. So I would say it's just sort of like who Asher is at his core, and who a lot of the key members on the engineering team are at their core. They are not satisfied. And so it was definitely an organic conversation, but we've got a really great relationship with Bitmain. Bitmain was obviously very open to the idea as well. And so that was sort of like an organic flow, but definitely initiated by us just, seeing ways that we could improve and build for the future.
Makes sense. I'm sharing my screen really quickly, so sorry for y'all on audio, but I just wanted to give people a glimpse at the U3 so that they can understand the form factor that we're talking about. Obviously, much different from the shoebox miner. Looks like a traditional Bitcoin, or looks like a traditional server rack. I mean, if you didn't know what this was, you wouldn't think that this was mining Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And you can see the all the electrical infrastructure. And I believe, are these cords up top, is that for the cooling, or those are the cords on the bottom?
You know what? I haven't been able to visit site yet and see it in live in action, but I would assume I believe it's for the cooling.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that.
Okay, I won't. Thank you for the input. Sue, well, we're bumping up on time here. I'm going to let you go in about a minute or so, but would love just for some closing thoughts on regards to, you mentioned, US BTC and Hut 8's merger is one of the biggest news stories of that year. How has that transition been with regards to the old Hut that you knew from the time that you started in 2020 to where we are now in 2024 with the new Hut?
Look, I think again, one of the things that Asher does best is he really does take a more of an operator mindset and an innovation mindset to everything that he does. And when he first took the helm in February of this year, he was laser focused on sort of cleaning up some areas of the business that really needed to be cleaned up. And so he basically got us into a really sort of clean baseline from a business perspective that is now enabling us to is setting us up for tremendous growth and putting us in a place where we can capture and catalyze growth, because it's sort of like the internal house is cleaned up now. I'm butchering this pitch right now, but if you know what I mean, like Asher effectively has laid the foundations and laid the groundwork for Hut to go into the next stage of growth, because our house is in order. And that's what he's been doing for the past couple of quarters. He's reduced our cost per coin. He's cleaned up our balance sheet. He's grown the business, built new relationships, designed a new form factor for Bitcoin mining that could potentially, be the future of alt forms of data center and compute. And so, I think it's just like, this is a new era for Hut, and I think 2025 is going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, I believe so. With all of the HPC news, also the U3, going to be very curious to see what ends up happening with that hosting deal. We didn't really get into that. Again, not trying to get into too much of the U3, but Hut 8 is hosting 15 exahashes of these units for Bitmain with the option to purchase them in 3 tranches 6 months out from the installation. It's going to be very curious to see how that plays out. Also, we'll be keeping tabs on news with Hut 8 for the gigawatt that's in the pipeline. Very excited to see where that goes. But Sue, any final thoughts before we sign off today?
No, that's it. Just stay tuned, and really was thrilled to be on here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Really appreciate the insights, and hope you have a good day. Please keep us posted on the gigawatt stuff, because we will definitely be covering that on the Mining Pod.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Bye, guys.
Take it easy, Sue. Thank y'all. See y'all next week.